guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Alexis and today I'm going to be sharing all of the books that I read during the month of January. Before I get into it, I would like to say that I did read a little bit more than 3 books physically because one of my goals for 2023, if you saw in my New Year Booktuber tag video, one of my goals is to read about 30% of my at the time physical TBR. I will admit since then I have bought some more, but I will also say that of the books that I did buy, they are ones that I've already read, so I don't count those as not read physically, but I digress. With that being said, I will go over the physical books as well as the audiobooks that I got to during the month of January. The first book I completed was The Voyage of the Dawn Treader by C.S. Lewis. In reading order, this is considered book 4 of the Chronicles of Narnia series. There's also publication order, but I'm not going by that. I'm going by chronological order of the book's timeline. So with that being said, this is written in third person. It is considered children's fiction or juvenile fiction because it is written for a younger audience. However, of course, any age can read this. It is heavily inspired by Christianity, C.S. Lewis did say, and it is, of course, influenced by his own later in life belief in Christianity. Although some of this also does allude to some dated things, overall, I think morally, if we're just going to talk about right and wrong, I think it still holds up pretty well as a series, but I did not complete it yet. I have the last book I need to get to, but we'll get there. So essentially, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader follows Lucy and Edmund. They are 2 of the 4 Pevensey siblings. You may be familiar with the movie adaptation, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. That is considered the second book chronologically, but it is the first book if we're going to go by publication date. And in this story, it only follows Lucy and Edmund along with their cousin Eustace, who is very nasty and very annoying. His character definitely irritated me. Gotta say, this book wasn't that enjoyable for me because of that. But when they do return to Narnia, they end up meeting the now King Caspian from Prince Caspian, and they help him on a voyage to find 7 of the lost friends. So that is where the title comes from, and the Dawn Treader is the name of the ship that they take. Some of my favorite moments include, of course, returning to Narnia and how they did so through a painting, and there's also the aspect of the mouse messing with Eustace. Unfortunately, the name of the mouse I can't remember, but if you saw the Prince Caspian movie, you'll know the mouse who I'm talking about. I also enjoyed some of the aspects moving forward and alluding to the future for Caspian and his family. Aslan hinting at Eustace possibly coming back, which, spoiler, of course he does return without the other Pevensies and with someone else, but I'll get to that book eventually. All in all, my attention did waver for this book. I did give it 2 out of 5 stars. It just didn't hold up compared to some of the other books, but again, this could just be because it was following newer characters in a new environment. Even though 2 of the 4 Pevensey siblings were involved, because majority of the content is new, I didn't love it as much. I prefer to follow characters that have been introduced in previous books or have it build upon the family that it's created. So I mean to say, in this series, C.S. Lewis does end up having some books follow characters that are not of the Pevensey tree or even relatives of the Pevensies at all. And I didn't care for those books as much as I cared for the ones with the Pevensey children. And even then, this one just wasn't working because it didn't really focus on Lucy and Edmund as much in their journey as, siblings, as former king and queen of Narnia, to have ruled during the golden age of Narnia, and seeing the aftermath of that. Now Caspian is king, and navigating those things. So yeah, this one, not my fave. After that, I did read my last Christmas romance for a while, and that is Merry Inkmas by Talia Hibbert. Again, I did listen to the audiobook using my Hoopla account. It is written in third person. It's a contemporary romance, holiday romance, interracial romance, and there is mention of domestic abuse and of violence in here. This follows tattoo artist Cash and barista Bailey. So Cash, at the age of 29, visits a coffee shop regularly so he can see barista Bailey, who is 25. When Bailey's boss tries to kick out a homeless man into the street, Bailey quits and decides to help the homeless man, and because he's moved by this, Cash does offer her a job in his tattoo shop. Some of my favorite moments, obviously giving her a job, being able to draw a tattoo for her that, of course, is Beauty and the Beast. I'm realizing that anything that even acknowledges Beauty and the Beast or feels loosely inspired or very heavily inspired by Beauty and the Beast, I'm a fan. So for sure, one of my favorite fairy tales. There's also the nickname Cashew Nut, and I thought that was really cute. It's not a nickname from Bailey, but it is a nickname from Cash's family, so I think that's a really cute nickname. All in all, this was a sweet and quick romance. Cash being artistic and wanting to do this for Bailey while she was trying to contribute was endearing. Considering how the plot worked out, I didn't believe 2 months was long enough for them to fall in love. I would have preferred more depth in the story, but all in all, it was a pretty fun relationship, and I did give this one 4 out of 5 stars. Next, I went into the Ice Planet Barbarian series by Ruby Dixon. I did read and listen to the first 3 books from that series. If you want my thoughts on it, check the cards again because I did do a little vlog about it. Long story short, I did decide to finally pick this up because I love Avatar with Pandora, directed by James Cameron, the world building. I, for one, enjoy it, and it doesn't have to be a complex plot. And I think it gets a lot of negativity because of how unoriginal it is, but I have to disagree because is that not what every other story does? It does draw on inspiration from life, and with that being said, he does it in such a fantastical, cinematic wonder world. And I'm really glad Disney World has Pandora now in Animal Kingdom. I'm happy to say I was there the first season it opened. So if you're into Avatar, if you went to Pandora in Disney World, definitely check out the Ice Planet Barbarian series if you are interested in a little more spice in some of your alien romances. For this, I did give book 1 4 stars and then book 2 and 3 5 stars. I did go into more detail as to why in that separate video, so feel free to check that out. Then I went into the Hoop Shorts, and this contains 2 novellas. There's Full Court Press novella and Fast Break novella. If you are familiar with basketball sport or you want to get into that, those are definitely terms that are used within basketball sport. And if you don't already know, I did play basketball growing up. I played from first grade to my sophomore year in high school. Why I stopped is a whole nother story in itself, but I do have some good memories playing basketball, and it's just definitely a sport that I hold close to my heart, right next to volleyball. This was no different. I enjoyed the trilogy that consists of Long Shot, Block Shot, and Hook Shot. All of those full-length novels, outstanding stories. Each book follows a different couple, and the 2 novellas in here are no different. In Full Court Press, that is written in first person dual perspective, of course. Most of Kennedy Ryan's books are written in dual perspective, with the exception of the Bennett series, which is her first, I believe, traditionally published series. And I did read 2 out of those 4, but that's a conversation for another day. The first novella in here, Full Court Press, follows Decker and Avery. Decker was mentioned as a side character in the main books of the Hoops trilogy, and this follows his love interest with Avery. Avery is a journalist, I believe, and then Decker, he is a former NBA player, and then he ends up working with her. So this is a workplace romance. They did meet years ago when she was just getting started in her journalist career, and he was just starting in the basketball world. So yeah, their first meeting was really cute. I did not feel the need to reread that first novella. If you want my full thoughts on it, definitely check out my Goodreads review. But I do tend to maybe overshare, so I always have my reviews with spoiler alert. But they did end up meeting in a locker room, a little fireworks, but nothing happened that first meeting, and then they don't meet till years later when Decker is finally starting at the same facility as Avery works. That one does have mention of suicide of loved one and grief. So, yeah, the first novella definitely has a little hint of grief and mourning compared to some of her other books. Like her most recent release, Before I Let Go, that book, heavy on the grief. But for a novella, it's short and still sweet, but definitely emotional as well. The second novella, which I read more recently, Fast Break, as you can see, is actually tabbed in this one. This was my first time reading it, and it follows Ian and Quinn. Ian is, I believe, one of the coaches now for the Waves team. The Waves team does include August from Longshot and Keenan from Hookshot. And Quinn is one of the clients slash best friends of Banner from Blockshot. So both characters are incorporated into the Hoops trilogy stories, but they're more so side characters, and it follows their love story. So for Quinn, she is an amputee. She did experience a health issue that led to her having her leg amputated, and she was a professional runner. There is mention of suicidal thoughts and attempt, but it's not very graphic in the novella, and this is her love story with Ian. Ian is always very supportive. He didn't look at her any different, and of course we love that in any person who is able to see you as you are and not, look at you as less than. So beautiful stories in here, as always expected from Kennedy Ryan, and she's definitely an author I see myself hopefully meeting one day. So there's that. I did give both of these 5 out of 5 stars. Then I decided to get into If We Ever Meet Again. This is book 1 in the If Love series by Anna Huang. This is the series that takes place before the Twisted series, so if you're familiar with any of these boys, same author did these. And this book follows Farah and Blake. So they met in a college program. They fell in love. Something happened, and Blake didn't really tell her the truth. So they separated, and their story continues in book 2. I'm not going to get into too much about my thoughts on this, but it is, as implied, a contemporary romance. It is an interracial romance, virgin heroine, some cheating in here, there's deception in here, and some microaggressions. Honestly, I didn't feel like the friendship was that strong in this series, or at least for the first 2 books. I have yet to complete book 3 and 4 in the If Love series. It felt very immature, and I didn't like some of the representation. Whereas Farah, she is a Chinese American. There are some things about her friend group, or even that the heroine comments on herself. For example, with food, certain ways about talking about food you dislike. It rubs me the wrong way. And as someone who is technically first generation on one side of the family, first generation American, and then coming to school, I have some pet peeve of people commenting on food that they don't like or that they see as weird or foreign to them. And it just rubs me the wrong way. And it rubbed me the wrong way how Farah would do, or even Blake coming from Texas. So his family, and sometimes he would make comments about the food that they were trying and the culture that he decided to immerse himself in. They did end up taking a study abroad program in Shanghai, so that's where the foreign aspect comes in. And some of Farah's friends, or their group of friends in the same program, they also have different backgrounds. But again, it did feel very disconnected, and like there wasn't enough understanding, whether that be between their relationship or just culturally in general. It just made me feel a little uncomfortable. And I'm not gonna lie, it makes me a little concerned now for King of Pride, which is the next book in the Kings of Sin series that Huang is continuing. One of the characters in that book is supposed to be half Chinese and Filipina. And in this book, one of Farah's close friends is supposed to be a Filipina American heiress. And I didn't like her. She had a lot of privilege, and she didn't seem humbled by having said privilege. She just felt very entitled and bratty to me. So she does end up having a book. I'm not going to talk about it though. This is considered only book 1 for Farah and Blake. I did read the second one, but this start was not that strong for me. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Of course, after their first book, I had to continue with Farah and Blake with If the Sun Never Sets, book 2 in the If Love series. As implied, this is a second chance romance. It does take place a few years later. They're already established in their careers and whatnot, and they meet again because of work. I thought that was kind of cute. Yeah, this was significantly better than book 1, which is why I'm kind of on the fence about the series now. But yeah, as you can see, I definitely tabbed some things in here that would just make me really happy or really feel for the characters. Some truths come out. Definitely some things that could have been communicated, but the way they are revealed, I really enjoyed. Again, I'm not going to get too much into this because maybe when I complete the series, I'll talk more about each of them in depth. But for now, I'm just going to say this is 5 out of 5 stars, and it's the second book about the same couple. I am currently in the process of reading book 3, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah. The next book I got into was Restore Me by J.L. Seegars. This is written in first person, dual perspective. And like I said, I listened to the audiobook. It is a contemporary romance, best friend's widow romance. There's some pining in here, mention of loss, grief, and a history of parental, physical, and verbal abuse. So when they met in college, Dominic was immediately taken with Sloane, whereas Sloane was a little too drunk to remember. So there's that. And the next day, she ended up meeting Dominic's best friend, Eric, and she ends up marrying Eric. She has this thriving love life with Eric, and that is until he passes away. Years later, they already had a happy marriage, and of course, it ended sadly. Dominic, he didn't really treat Sloane fairly throughout their years of knowing each other over the course of her relationship with Eric. And Sloane never knew why, because Dominic just didn't treat her fairly, and she didn't remember the night they met first. So there's that. But yeah, I have a lot of happy and sad moments about this. I enjoyed the flashback scenes, especially when we get to see them in college and how Sloane first was when they met. I enjoyed the romancing and the tiptoeing because of work. They do have some overlap with the jobs that they do. Sloane is an interior designer, and Dominic is more into the hands-on building aspect of it. Can't remember his exact title, but they do end up working on the same project, and this is them fighting their attraction toward each other. Sloane is still grieving the loss of her husband, and in a way feels guilty for finding happiness after losing her husband with his best friend. Dominic, on his end, he had been patient, and I guess in a way he had already prepared to never have her because she was happily with his best friend and they were practically brothers. I loved how patient Dominic could be with Sloane. And Sloane, I feel like she deserved this after all that they've been through, and Dominic of course deserved it as well. But just after experiencing the losses that Sloane did and being able to feel comfortable with allowing yourself to be happy again, that is a major step, I feel, for anybody who experiences something that is very emotional or very heavy, something that can be very draining, and then after that being able to overcome it. So I applaud her character. I definitely enjoyed some favorite moments, such as the ring, or when they're together for the first time, and just a lot of swoon-worthy things. I made a list on my Goodreads. If you care to look at that, I suggest only do it after you read it, so maybe we can talk about it together. But all in all, I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. I definitely look forward to reading the next books, Revive Me, that are supposed to follow Eric's twin sister, Mallory, and her love interest with Chris. That will also be a second chance. They were college sweethearts and then he broke it off. So looking forward to their books, but they are pretty thick. So we'll see. Then I went into The Silver Chair by C.S. Lewis. Again, this is written in third person and it is an audiobook. It is, of course, juvenile fiction, so designated for children, but anyone can read it. It is in fantasy and it is part of the Chronicles of Narnia series. This is the second to last one chronologically. I believe there are a total of 7 books. This follows Eustace and Jill. They go to school together. For majority of the book, they only call each other by their last names, and it wasn't until they finally trusted each other did they start calling each other by their first names or Christian names. I thought that was a nice little aspect to have in here. But essentially, they go back to Narnia, or rather, they're pulled back into Narnia on an adventure to find King Caspian's long-lost son. King Caspian is already well into old age, and he just wants his son found, who had been missing since the, murder of his wife, who was a star that we met in a previous book. So yeah, this book, I did appreciate it a little more. Again, it alludes to some religious aspects in here. I'm not going to go too in depth, other than the fact that, Eustace's character was better in here. He and Jill were pretty good at looking out for each other. The lessons that Jill was learning because of Aslan and words of wisdom. I don't know, something about the wise old character sharing facts is just really appealing to me. I mean, a lot of fantasy tends to do that. If we take Aslan from this, or if we are looking at Harry Potter, we have Dumbledore, or if we're thinking Lord of the Rings, you got Gandalf. If we're thinking X-Men, you got Professor X. It's just, something about the old wise characters. It's just always spitting facts. Yeah, this one was all right. I mean, they of course end up finding the son, and there is some negative backstory as in terms of how he was kidnapped and by who. I'm not going to get into that because, you know, if you decide to get into it, great. And if not, you can just look it up because it's definitely on Google. I did end up Googling some things afterwards because I needed to find some clarity. But yeah, I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. It was a little bit better than the previous book, but again, because there are characters I hadn't really gotten attached to, it's neither here nor there. Now, after that, I got into a very frustrating book. And I mean to say that because I listened to Lynn's 22324 Assa S. Sin. So essentially, this is following an assassin and her love story, if you can even call it that, with her target, the person she was hired to kill. So this is a first person book written in single perspective, and it is a graphic audiobook. This is the first time I've listened to a graphic audiobook, and honestly, that made it so much more cinematic and theatrical for me. I did enjoy it until the end because I got pissed. Before I get into that, this is a novella length story, arguably romantic suspense. Why I say arguably, I'll get into that in a moment. This is an interracial romance, insta love. It feels like the male main character has Asperger's syndrome. There is violence and suicide in here. And that is why I say arguably, because this was no romance to me. This was a tragedy. This is the assassin's contemporary modern version of Romeo and Juliet. You know, that forbidden aspect, you can't be together because essentially Assa falls for her target Henry and has to deal with the repercussions. So there is the sense of insta-lust. I did feel like Henry's character, and I'm not sure, or I'm not familiar that well with Asperger's syndrome, so I'm not sure how it really affects people socially, so I'm not sure how accurate it is in this story. But for me, because there wasn't a lot of romancing, it definitely felt like he was a really blunt character, and I didn't feel like I was reading the social cues very well, or rather, he wasn't, and again, that could contribute to his condition. But I didn't feel like it was really love. It was just more so lust, and they would travel around together, more so because it was a way to protect him. And Assa just wanted to protect him from the truth as well, because the entire time he was not aware of who she truly was. They didn't really know each other. They didn't know their jobs or why so and so was targeted. So it was just really irritating to me. But if it wasn't for the ending, I might have rated it higher. But because they ended up committing suicide to save the other, or because they ended up committing suicide, I was just very pissed about this book because on Hoopla it says romance, and I'm not sure how the author promotes it. I mean, on Goodreads it does the same thing, but this is no romance to me because they do not end up together. It is a tragedy. It is a romantic tragedy, but it's still a tragedy at the sum of it. So, very annoyed about this. Yeah, and I have some other things I mentioned in my Goodreads review. If you want to read that, sure. But for me, I gave this 2 out of 5 stars, and I gave it a 2 because it was still interesting enough for me to continue. But I'm very disappointed in my lack of interest in the male main character, and I'm very disappointed in the way that ended. The audiobook was very well executed, but it just, the story itself, I don't see myself returning to it. In fact, I feel bamboozled. I feel lied to. But yeah, no, I moved on. After that, I completed Funny Feelings by Tarah Dewitt as an audiobook. This is written in first person, dual perspective. And it is, of course, a contemporary romance. This is a friends to lovers romance. There's some fake dating in here, employer-employee romance somewhat. There's an age gap of 10 years, single dad romance, grumpy sunshine, I would argue. There is some ASL representation or American Sign Language representation in here. There's also mention of assault, but I digress. This follows Farley and Meyer. So they have been friends for 3 years, and Meyer is a former comedian who backed away from the spotlight after having his daughter, Hazel. So Farley is just getting started in her career in comedy. They met, and on a whim, he decides to become her manager. They maintain a close friendship for several years before Farley gets a job opportunity. But she has to do a PR stunt, and that includes fake dating. Meyer volunteers essentially to keep her from going to someone else. But at the end of the day, they've always been attracted to each other, but they never acted on it until now that they have the opportunity. So I already think it had a strong start. Each chapter included, or I should say, started with a quote by a famous comedian. There were a couple with Robin Williams in here. Rest in peace to a phenomenal comedian and actor. I still rewatch his movies such as Hook or Aladdin. It's just, he's amazing. He was amazing. The Dead Poets Society, phenomenal movie. A little more serious, but yeah, he definitely had range, and I appreciate that the author was able to acknowledge the comedians of the world. But yeah, I did enjoy their date to the apple orchard, or their first meeting, showing that she knew ASL. I enjoyed their meetups on their trips. But yeah, the umbrella tattoo, the meaning behind that, I do see myself revisiting this story. However, I do feel like the end was a little anticlimactic. There wasn't enough drama for me for it to be a full 5 stars, so I did give it 4 out of 5. But honestly, when I think about it more and more, and because it hasn't really gotten out of my head, maybe I could bump it to 5. But I don't know. For now, I'm going to leave it at 4. But I can see why people would want to rate this more. Perhaps the humor isn't for everybody. I've noticed some of the YouTubers that I do follow, they didn't find the humor that appealing. For me, this hit the mark. I thought it was pretty funny. I laughed out loud. There are some videos, in fact, that I've been coming across on Facebook with little shorts of comedians and their live shows. They don't always hit for me, but sometimes they're pretty funny. And there was a moment in here when Farley actually took it a step too far, and Meyer was there to comfort her. It was just something I really appreciated as someone who enjoys comedian and comedy entertainment. So, yeah. The last story that I completed for January was Strictly Professional by Christina C. Jones as an audiobook. This is written in first person, dual perspective. It is a contemporary romance, workplace romance. There's close proximity in here, black love romance. It is arguably a slow burn. Loss of loved ones mentioned in here. There's some breast cancer awareness in here, cheating ex, and toxic parents. So this follows Gabby, who moved to get away from her demanding parents and her cheating ex of 8 years. On her first night out with her friend and her friend's boyfriend, Gabby meets Terrence and they share a kiss. Afterwards, he never called her, but she turned up at his work one day, and it turned out she was hired to be his assistant. So I enjoyed this. They did have a lot of cute moments, just meeting at the club and comforting her after an unfortunate workplace situation. They are in the law office working together. There's the aspect of not wanting to take it too far, but also can't help but being attracted to each other. So I just enjoy that. There are some things toward the end, again, that felt like they were a little rushed. There was this family secret. I felt kind of thrown in there. The idea of, parents being very demanding. I feel like they didn't get enough repercussions. There wasn't a lot of consequence there. There is mention of her being a little bit curvier, but of course he loves her for being curvy. They exchanged Christmas gifts that were kind of cute. Little things like that I really enjoyed about the story, but all in all, did it really stick with me? I'm not sure. So I did give this one 4 out of 5 stars as well because of the lack of repercussions in the end and feeling a little bit rushed that, he's just now finding out about the truth about Gabby's relationship to the law office. It's just miscommunication things I wasn't really vibing with, but overall, very decent story. So I'll stand by my 4 out of 5 stars, I think. And those are all the books that I read during the month of January 2023. Let me know in the comments down below if you have any thoughts on these books or if you have any recommendations from me. But with that being said, until next time, my name's Alexis. Take care and happy reading.